So, welcome to today's episode of the Power Couple podcast. Joining us is Jenn Pike, functional medicine diagnostic nutritionist, registered holistic nutritionist, certified yoga and Pilates instructor, medical exercise specialist, and all around amazing human being and woman. Welcome, Jenn.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to be here today.
Well, we're very excited to have you. And to start off, thank you for the amazing work that you do.
Thank you.
I was introduced to your work about 4 or 5 years ago now, I think, from a girlfriend of mine who actually was following your podcast. And then she ended up doing the hormone project with you.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. And I think it was a podcast episode that she sent me, and she said, you got to listen to Jenn Pike. You're going to love her. And I did right off the bat. And but what I want to share with you is that at that point in life, early 40s, going through a lot of changes physically, as we do with women, but also it was a time where both Roman and I had started a holistic health journey, and mostly as a means of my recovery from a major burnout, mental, physical. I attribute it now to because of being on the contraceptive pill and then antidepressants, which I know is a story that you're familiar with.
Yeah.
And, you know, when we're open to the universe, it does bring us what we need when we need it. And I just wanted to let you know that your presence in my life at that time was a huge influence.
Oh, thank you. I love hearing that. That's awesome. I love when, sometimes it's, especially on the other side of the mic, you can feel like you're just talking to yourself. It's different than I've taught a lot of workshops my whole life, and you get this immediate feedback right away because you can see facial expressions and body language, and if the tonality and the topic of what you're leading into is really connecting. And with a podcast, it's actually kind of vulnerable because you are, sharing and then it goes just out into the world, and you don't really know sometimes how it's landing or if it's connecting with others on the other side. So I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Well, it's really our pleasure and our appreciation. And like I said, I want to just thank you on behalf of myself and all the women that you have influenced over these years, and the trickle out effect, because not only has it benefited my life, but it's benefited my husband's, my family's, friends. So
yeah, my lateral legs, and I've never been stronger, and the crab movement, and all that.
Oh,
the clam.
It's okay. It's better you called it the crab than some people are like, that move, the beaver. And I'm like, it's not that. Let's not call it that. That's not what it is.
Yeah. But no, seriously, the bands have been amazing, and definitely, increase mobility, focus, blood flow. So you have some amazing workout routines that I definitely recommend anybody, even if you're a man, check it out.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Thank you.
Absolutely. And that's the great thing too, is that your focus is on women's hormonal health and cyclical living, but it's not just women benefiting from that. It's their partners, their husbands, everybody. And if they're open to that, my goodness, I mean, what you teach opened up a whole different area of health for us as a couple. So
I love that, because something that I've often said is that, for me, when I think about the work that I do and that I've been doing for almost 30 years now, in some capacity out there, is like, I've just come to realize that if I help the woman of the house, I help the whole house. If I help the mom of the house, I help the entire family. And that this is how we can create a lot of grace for ourselves, is understanding that we don't have to try to fix everyone and everything. If we can start with ourselves, if we can show up and lead our lives in a certain way where we're really modeling for other people, whether it's your children or it's your partner or it's whomever in the world, that like, I matter, and that you make that matter in motion from the choices and decisions and things like that's what's contagious for people. And it's like, we don't have to do this in a perfect way. It's just like every time you show up and you choose yourself, someone else is witnessing that. So oftentimes we look at like people who have bigger platforms or who are out in the world and we're like, oh, they're the mentor or they're the guru, they're whatever. And it's like, no, every single one of us, you are a mentor for someone, whether or not you realize it. There's always someone that's watching and being inspired by, how it is you show up in your life. So it's so important.
Absolutely. I love that. And that's part of what I love about your practice too, Jen, is that it's not just about talking about the science of hormones, the physical movements that you could do, etc. You approach it on this spiritual level as well, that
Mhm.
it's about connecting and aligning with what's inside that so many of us, especially women, get disconnected with or have been taught to be disconnected with. And so, but let me back up a little bit, because for those listeners who may not be familiar with your work, although
Yeah.
I mentioned you on our podcast before, um, if you could just tell us a bit about your story of how you got to where you are today, what inspired you. I know you have years to share with us.
Yeah, really it started as a kid. Like I grew up in a house where my dad was always very active and at the gym and playing sports, and my mom was going off to like jazzercise with her girlfriends or like going for a walk. And I grew up in a house where my parents made our food. Right. So it was like we didn't have a sprawling garden. We didn't live in that. But my parents, like, pasta was made, sauce was made. Like, and I grew up where this was normal. And I grew up where, taking care of your body was just part of what your daily habit and routine was. That's what was modeled for me. And I connected to it really early on. And, by the time I was, 14, I was at the gym every day with my dad in the morning before school, like high school, which was just weird to other people because they're like, you're getting up at 6, you're in high school, you're going to and I loved it. I loved how I felt. I loved watching people in the gym. I was so like enamored by witnessing all these different bodies with, different backgrounds and shapes and sizes and just going in there and moving for themselves. And that this was a priority and this was a habit every day. I really got rooted into that very young. And by the time I was 17, I was teaching group exercise classes to the adults at that same gym. And I actually registered my company at 17. My dad had said to me, I can see you've got a passion about this. And like, what do you think you want to do moving forward? And I was like, hands down, I'm going to work in fitness. And he said, then why don't you actually register your own company? And from my dad, he was looking at it from like a bookkeeping, accounting, back end side of things. And so I've had this company for 28 years now. I'm 45. And so I knew then in those moments, like I just loved teaching so much. And so originally I thought that I would go into teaching. So I started down a path of human anatomy, biomechanics, and phys when I was in school. It's how I came out being a medical exercise specialist. I was doing additional designations and I was originally going to go back to university and get my teaching degree and then go and teach. And what I realized was the teaching wasn't going to be in that format. I had the opportunity to start to work with a lot of personal training clients. I got a job within the area that I lived that then connected me to being able to work with professional athletes. And I was working down at Station 7 in a Reebok center where the Toronto Maple Leafs were training out of. And I was, getting this opportunity to train a lot of the farm team boys that were like being drafted. And it was such a cool environment. And it was so much fun because they had access and resources to everything. So I was getting this deep level of training about the human body, about rehab, about all these different things. And then I was also starting to do a lot of part-time personal training and teaching in Newmarket, Ontario, which is where I grew up. And I was working with mainly women, and a lot of them are moms, and I did not have children at that point, but I just kept thinking to myself, gosh, like it was so polarizing. I was working with these professional athletes who had team on top of team on top of team in terms of support. And they had all the resources. And then I was going and working with these women who didn't have any of that. They didn't have the community. They were trying to just carve out a little bit of time for themselves to feel better and be healthy on top of working, holding down a household, raising their kids. And I just started to find myself being more interested by these women. And I kept saying, I'm training the everyday athlete of life, which are the women and the mom. And I started to kind of lose interest in training the paid athletes because I was like, they're not going to miss me. They're fine. They've got like, but I felt very called to these women where I was like, these women do actually need someone like me in their life. And I needed them. And it's like those times where the teacher becomes the student. Like I've always stayed the student. So I was learning so much from working with women about what was really needed. And I quickly realized that exercise was so fantastic, but it was only going to get us to a certain point. Nutrition was huge. And so I went back to school in 2001. That's when I first became a registered holistic nutritionist. So 24 years ago, I started to really bring that into my practice. I got even better results with clients because now I had this full understanding of the physical body and the physiology combined with the nutrition. And when you bring those together, I was like, wow, this is the powerhouse. And then what started to happen after that was I was having women come in and say, I'm getting better results and I'm feeling good, but I still have insert ABC, whatever the symptoms were. And I'm going to my doctor and my doctor says I'm fine and my blood work is fine, but I don't feel fine. And then I just remember being like, can you bring me the blood work? I might be able to kind of figure some things out. There was a lot I understood learning from in school, and then there was things I didn't. So I went back to school again and I studied blood chemistry, functional blood chemistry. I wanted to understand on a deeper level what was going on. And in that, I started to recognize I was picking up a lot of things specifically about women's thyroids that weren't being tested, because all that was being tested was TSH, which is not a thyroid hormone. It's a pituitary hormone. And there was 5 other markers that should have been tested on these women who couldn't lose weight, were losing their hair, had zero energy, no libido, constipated, dry skin, anxiety, all these different issues that were going on. So that opened up another leg for me. And I just kept to continue go back and learning more and more. Like I'm taking another functional course in a few months, and I don't even do private practice anymore, but I know that what I teach, I can bring to the mic. I can bring to my workshops. And so it's been this, progression of all these years of doing this while still staying involved in fitness. And I was the personal training director for Sports Clubs of Canada and Bally Total Fitness. And then, we moved to Australia. I worked down there. We came back. And at that point, we were getting married and we were going to be starting a family. And when I had my first child, I was like, whoa, this is different. Like the textbooks didn't prepare me for the totality of what was going to shift on every level in my body. And now, as a woman who was a mother, my body required something different. And I had to learn new tools in order to support that for myself. My hormones had shifted. The structure of my body had shifted. So it led me down another path. And I had another child and I was like, whoa, that was also different than the first one. And I also remember thinking, I kind of feel like I've done a disservice to all the moms I was training before I was a mom because I didn't get it. I heard them, but I did not get it because I didn't have a lived experience. So at that point too, I made a commitment to myself that I was really only going to teach the things where I had that lived experience. It's why a lot of women will come into my world now and say, I love all the education you're teaching about perimenopause and menopause, but what about me? I'm in my 70s. And I'm like, I'm going to connect you with so-and-so because I'm not in my 70s. My mom is, and I can, but I don't have the same kind of like reference that I think you could learn from somebody like Dr. Felice Gersh, who's in her 70s and still practicing, and she has the lived experiences. So as time went on, in the early days, I went from working with athletes to working with moms to working with a lot of pediatric to then I decided to open up my own studio. And I owned a studio in Keswick, Ontario for many years. I then sold that. It was the best and hardest thing I had ever done in my life. It built me up and crushed me all at the same time. It was a lot of work. And in 2015, I sold it and transitioned completely online. And now this is what I do. I teach online programs. I have a podcast. I have a YouTube channel. And, I have an online fitness studio. So everything I've always done has come with me. It's now just in a different way. And it comes through the lens of education.
I love that. Love it. And if anybody's wondering what we were referring to earlier when Roman mentioned about doing the clams and all that, that is your synced program,
Yes.
which I have been doing, and Roman by default, some days for about the last 3 or 4 years. And
I love that.
Jenn, it's been again a life-changing thing for me because it's the first time that I was able to connect with an exercise movement routine that I stuck with.
Yeah.
I worked at a gym. I worked at Good Life Fitness, went to the crazy classes, but I did things like, wouldn't work out. And then first day of menstruation, I'm so pent up with energy from not working out. I'm doing a HIIT workout.
Right.
And your education switched all that for me. It made sense to me. I mean, I had no idea that I had something called an infradian rhythm until I was
Yeah.
in my early 40s and started listening to you.
Yeah.
And so it's that education component is huge that you offer to all of our women, and especially that lived experience, like you say.
Yeah. And it's, I mean, I was in my mid 30s before, and I had been in this industry learning from the best, being trained by functional medicine practitioners, all of it, women's health and hormone experts. And it wasn't until I was in my mid 30s that I even heard what the infradian rhythm was, that I understood that we had 4 different phases that we go through, that our cycle and our period are not the same thing, that not only are we not like little men, as so many people say, but there is nothing hormonally that is in relation to similarity from a woman to a man. And when I first heard that, like it wasn't even, I shouldn't say it was new information. All of a sudden I remembered that my body knew that innately. So it was like a deep remembering of, oh yeah, we have a built-in cross-training system in our bodies as women, and no one was teaching us that at the time. Now there's a lot of information out there about how to train according to your, bleed week, which is your period, your follicular phase, ovulation, and that luteal phase. And, inside of Synced, we teach women that. We give them a lot of education, but also what happens when you're in perimenopause and now all of a sudden everything is irregular, or you're in menopause where you don't have a period anymore. Like how do you still follow some type of cyclical living and honoring that part of your body? And so we teach that based on the lunar, the moon calendar. And at the end of the day, for women who are like, I am so confused by all of this because I was never taught this. So, everyone comes to the information at a different time. Some women come to the information when their period has already, it's left the building. They no longer have an actual bleed anymore. And there's a grieving process for women because there is that energy of, how differently would I have felt and would life have been if I knew this when I was younger? It's one of the most common things that women say. And then they're coming into this trying to meet their body through all these new changes that they're going through hormonally, which it's not just our sex hormones. It's not just the decline of the ovarian hormones. This is a complete systemic shift in our body, from our brain to our bones to every major system, to our breast health, to our uterine health, everything. And so, when women talk about, oh, my hormones are out of whack, or I'm in that perimenopause, menopause journey, as women, this is not something you can avoid. We are all going to go through this. It shouldn't be something we're trying to avoid or like hide from or be afraid of. And as the education is changing, this is the whole thing, is like learning how to embrace this and actually like honor that in our bodies, because it is a gift that we actually have this opportunity to go through so many transitions.
If I can just say something too, and for all you men out there, obviously, when I understood Bodana's rhythm, I was fascinated by all the infradian stuff, and just because I never heard that either. So I'm like, well, why didn't I hear that? But we preach rhythms to our subscribers, our readers, our clients, our colleagues. It's all about circadian rhythm, powering on with light in the morning. And when you say it's such a gift, like that sunrise, we've been doing that for I don't even know how many years, but we do that every single morning because that is a gift, right? And that's the gift of nature. That's the gift of rhythm that we can all use. And that's why Jenn's message is so powerful, and ours I'm so passionate about, because this is something that if we go away tomorrow, that sun is still going to rise, right?
Mm-hmm.
Regardless of what kind of clouds are on the horizon, it's always there, right? So, this is just another free tool that we can all use. So, laying in these rhythms in our lives, rhythms are power. Our bodies are designed to live like that, and it's nothing to be afraid of. Like people say, "Oh, I'm a night owl," or "I didn't sleep well," like you used to say, but you got to embrace it, right? Because this is a gift, like you said. So I love that.
Yeah. And it's a, for a lot of us, like I said, in the beginning, it feels like a new learning. And then you start to adopt it as part of just how you live. It's like brushing your teeth. Then you're like, oh, this actually feels normal and natural, right? Like I wake and I go to bed at times that, people are like, I do not understand, and like I go to bed pretty early, and I'm like, well, because for me, like when the sun sets and the moon rises, like the sun is your cortisol, right? That's your cortisol awakening response. This is how we naturally wake. And this is the body's internal mojo of how every system, every process, every cue starts to get turned on. And in the evening, when the sun sets and the moon rises, the moon is our melatonin. And we have all of these neurotransmitters that need to be, signaled before we even get to the point where we're effectively producing enough melatonin. So it's like these are all cues given to our body. So for me, when it's like 8 o'clock at night, my body is already starting to like give me the signs now, because I've been doing this for so long. Like, you need to start to unwind and like wrap it up. Like, you need to, quiet down the lights. And even before that, this time of year, because we're at this time of year in North America, at least, where the sun, it's setting at like 5, 5:15. So it's earlier that your body is craving that extra rest and sleep. And again, that is by design and that is on purpose. Not only are we cyclical as women, but we are seasonal as humans. So our body has these built-in rhythms of light and dark and wake and sleep and performance and recovery. We just live in a time now where, being part of an industrialized revolution, that light is accessible 24/7, internet is accessible 24/7, overstimulation, false dopamine hits from food and images and all of those things. We are so overstimulated that our nervous systems are literally vibrating 24/7, and an overvibrated body literally loses the capacity to self-regulate and to calm down. And the body will keep looking for the next hit of the thing that's going to elevate and stimulate you. But internally, people will feel like, I am exhausted, but I'm restless. I'm wired, right? Everyone hears that term. I'm wired, but tired. I'm so tired, but my brain won't shut off. And it's like, as soon as you can start to understand that that is not actually like, you're not just born a night owl. Some of us have, like, we do have chronotypes where some of us are more, later day individuals than we are early morning. But so many clients who come into our programs, they are literally going to sleep the next day. So they're like waking up today at 7 a.m. and they're going to bed after midnight, which is tomorrow. And it's like that we're not designed to be doing on an ongoing basis. So I find for people that when we start to talk about things like this, they hear circadian rhythm, infradian rhythm, the brain automatically goes, that sounds complicated. But when you start to give analogies, when you start to talk about it just in like the rhythms of how we move through our day, no one can hear that and not have these like aha moments and be like, you're right. Yeah. Like, I get that. I do that. I do that. It's interesting.
Oh yeah, it certainly is. And talking about chronotypes, I'm a dolphin. So the best analogy that was given was how the dolphin's brain is always kind of half awake when it's
Mm-hmm.
sleeping, to be on alert. And that's how it was for a lot of my life, like since childhood. And that
Mm.
was one of those things, in talking about circadian rhythm. I mean, decades of poor sleep habits, health. Not that, because of my parents or anything like that. It was my mind that wouldn't stop. And
Mm-hmm.
to your point, then bring on all of these modern contraptions and what we're dealing with and stresses. I mean, it was out of control for me at one point, where I was suffering from insomnia, and you start feeling like you're losing control of your life
Yeah.
because of it, right? And so that importance of sleep is again something too that is so underrated still in our society. And I can identify with you now that, and I'm so grateful for this change in my life, that I was able to get that under control, to change the
Yeah.
mindset, to some cognitive behavioral therapy, to reshift that, and getting out for that sunrise and dimming
Yeah.
those lights at night. Like, it's huge,
Yeah.
huge.
And it's all the little things that we think don't matter, right? Like, everybody thinks it's like there's got to be a hammer that has to come in to like, change things. And it's like, no, 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 no. We're talking like small screws, nuts and bolts, washers. Like, as I always love, one of my favorite quotes of life has always been, it is small hinges that swing big doors. Our brains want to think it's the opposite, where we have to go and change everything. And it's like, if you could just start to have exposure in the morning to full spectrum or natural light, that was the only change you focused on, I can guarantee you, you would by default have a little bit more energy. You probably wouldn't have the cravings for the stimulants and the sweets in the mornings the way that you do. And you'd probably start to sleep just a tiny bit better in the evening. And then it's like, okay, so what's the next layer that you could add on? And I think that, because of the work I do, everyone's always looking for the magic bullet. Everyone is like, what's the food to eat? What's the specific meal plan? What are the exact macros? What is the supplement that I take? And it is, when it comes to sleep, like if you don't have adequate rest for your body, the other things can help to offer some management and some support, but they cannot move the needle without the body getting appropriate rest and recovery, right? Like the only time that the glymphatic system in our body gets stimulated to be turned on is when we sleep. And the glymphatic system, everyone hears about the lymphatic system, which is essentially your body's internal system of how we clear waste and debris and how we move through fluid throughout the body. It supports everything in your system. Your glymphatic system is in the brain. And this only gets stimulated when we have appropriate sleep. When we get into that sweet spot of having enough REM and deep sleep and light sleep, so we move through the different stages of rest. The glymphatic system is like the janitorial system for the brain. So it comes in and literally like sweeps the cobwebs away, cleans up the junk, refreshes so that you have the ability the next day to have all these neurons and all these new neural pathways to start to wire and fire together. So your cognition is sharp. Your neural function is there so that you have good recall and memory, and you can actually show up and like be on point. You're not dragging yourself. You're not saying, I got to get to the coffee. Like I got to wake up. And then an hour after that coffee, I need to grab like something sweet or quick. Like I need to pick me up. If you describe yourself in that way, you don't need to have a test to tell you your circadian rhythm is out of balance. And it's like you start to stack these things. So we start like working with circadian rhythm. And for me, the circadian rhythm and supported blood sugar, they go hand in hand. Like they go hand in hand, right? Supporting your blood sugar and insulin so that you have stable glucose available to the brain, to the body throughout the day. It's a safety cue to your adrenals, right? So it's like when we talk about stress hormones like cortisol production and then how the body manages that cortisol. So I always describe to people that your adrenal glands, which are, walnut sized glands, they sit on top of your kidneys. And all of us are impacted by this. But as women, our adrenals tend to take a little bit of an extra hit. The first side of it is that your adrenals sitting on top of your kidneys govern your ovaries and your ovarian function, right? So if we look at Chinese medicine, any woman who has a hormonal imbalance, the liver and the kidneys are always going to be treated because they play the biggest role. When we look at the human body as a whole, if these adrenals, which every day you have like a deposit of cortisol that's put into the system. So you wake up, one of the cues to the bank of your adrenals for your deposit is the natural light. The other cue is your stable blood sugar, okay? The body getting up emotion. So the adrenals should produce the highest amount of cortisol in your body within like the first anywhere from 30 to 90 minutes of waking. This is now your deposit for the day. Your body now has to manage your cortisol production for the rest of the day from this initial deposit. So it's like I say to the two of you each have $100 for the day and you've got to budget wisely. So now you're going to have to think about the decisions of where you're going to spend your $100 so that by the end of the day, you haven't gotten into a deficit. You're not like in the minus. You're not like in the negative. But for us as humans, even if we have a good surge in the morning, oftentimes we just blast through it and now we're trying to function off fumes and we need the nap in the afternoon or we need the second coffee and we're just like dragging to get to the end of the day. You'll start to know you're on a better path of your health when you're like, no, like my energy is pretty even keel. I don't feel like these huge highs. I don't feel these massive lows. Like I feel pretty good. And then it's like, as you're coming into the evening, I talked about really recognizing, giving your body these cues. Like we live in a time now where you're probably going to need a tool like blue blockers at night, unless you live in a house where everyone's agreed to like change over to amber light bulbs, and like that's not happening in our house, right? It's just not, for many reasons. And so we all have blue blockers and our kids sometimes wear them and sometimes their screen is literally on top of their face in bed. And I'm like, oh, I wonder if you're going to have a good sleep tonight. Right? Like, you're not, PS.
Mhm.
But it's like for us, my husband and I, we have two kinds of blue blockers. We have the darker ones we wear in the evening, and we have 50% blockers that we both work online. We're on Zoom. My eyes, 2 hours into Zoom, like I am wiped. I can feel it. I have a standing desk, I have a walking pad. Like, we all have to actually actively do things nowadays to break out of this state of the screen fatigue. And just, we are exposed to so much toxic light all the time. So any little change we can make is so good.
Hmm.
Hmm.
I, oh,
No, go ahead.
I think we might have the same thought,
Yeah.
because I love that you said that, because of course our whole premise is to help people navigate this minefield of technology, the blue light, EMF exposure, dealing with the tech addiction, all of that, helping parents to deal with that with their kids. And so I love that you've brought up these elements, and we teach that to our clients and our listeners on a regular basis. But what I wanted to ask you too, if you could dive a little bit deeper on that same level, and going back to the sleep element, to regenerate ourselves, if you could really, perhaps, I think, focus on the our generation and older, the perimenopause and older, because that's tends to be mostly our listeners
Yeah.
and clients. They're more awake to all of this,
Yes.
and so if you could jump into that element a bit more, because we were talking about rhythms and all this, but you and I both know from personal experience that that's not the case now. And once we hit that perimenopause, that this goes a lot out of whack. So could you provide your input on that level for us as well?
Yeah. So when we're talking about like sleep and rest and recovery when you're 40 years old plus, okay, let's just say it. I mean, perimenopause, it's starting in the ovaries, typically around 35 behind the scenes, but most women won't start to have a lot of symptoms until they're like 38, 40, definitely by 43 and 45. Like, your body's starting to give you some of those cues. When we start to struggle with sleep when we're 40 and older, there's a lot of different reasons as to why. So one is what we just talked about. It's that relationship to light and dark. The other is lack of minerals, right? Like, the requirement for our minerals as we age goes up tremendously. So everybody hears about the importance of magnesium, which is really important. A lot of people look at magnesium like it is a sedative because it can help sleep, but it's not. It's just a very relaxing mineral. And it's going in and nourishing the body on a way that, it deeply requires. And so that can help to calm the body into sleep. There's also different things that can be utilized. And before I just kind of tap into some of those supplements and herbs, I want to just take one step back and explain for the listeners, like, I'm not giving you a grocery list right now of supplements to go buy. First and foremost, focus on your daily habits. Make sure you're eating enough good quality food. You're getting an ample source of protein and fiber, good quality carbohydrates, and healthy fats 3 to 4 times a day as like breakfast, lunch. I love for our clients to have a snack around 3 in the afternoon. Our women, I really do find it helps to get in front of blood sugar drops, keeps their energy stable, helps them to eat a really good, healthy meal, and sets them up for better sleep at night. So that's really important. The other thing I just want to mention, because for ages 40 plus, oftentimes there can maybe be a glass of wine in the evening, or, some alcohol. And this is extremely detrimental to your sleep. Like, you will not sleep well. It might help you fall asleep, but you may wake up with hot flashes or feeling dehydrated in the middle of the night, have to get up and pee, have a headache the next morning, be groggy. So there's no health benefit to having the booze in. Those things being said, when we talk about different things to be supporting ages 40 and plus, some of these things I'm going to talk about are going to be specific to men and women. Like the magnesium, men and women, doesn't matter. You both need it. When we talk about certain things that are precursors to melatonin, so things that work really beautifully with melatonin, which for me is not, I don't give this as a tranquilizer to people. Melatonin is one of the body's most primary antioxidants. It supports detoxification. It supports the glymphatic system. It's not addictive. It's not going to prevent your body and your pituitary and the gut's ability to produce melatonin. And in most people, when you hit 40 and definitely by 50, your natural production is going to decline. So if you are not going and practicing the light, and like I say, light nutrition, honestly, because it's feeding your body. If you're not practicing that, you're not getting in these healthy minerals. Um, you're going to need to make sure that you've got some of that in. GABA and L-theanine, 5-HTP, these are other supportive mechanisms that can help. There's a lot of herbs I love for people, like valerian is beautiful. There's a really amazing Canadian company called St. Francis Herb Farm. They have a product called Valericalm that I use in probably 90% of my practice with women. So they'll take the magnesium and the Valericalm before bed. They'll do like 3 droppers full, and it is wonderful to help them to just settle the nervous system, quiet the busy mind, and they don't wake up feeling groggy. They actually wake up feeling rested. When we look at some other things like bringing in combinations, right? So it could be something that has all of the things that I've just mentioned. You can't take something once and then go, it did or didn't work. Like, you actually have to create a rhythm in the body in order to get to that place. And then it's also hygiene for your room. Like, when you're over the age of 40, it's like, look around. Okay, we shouldn't need night lights anymore at that time. If we have a lot of plugged in electronics, like my husband and I, we're like, we go into our room like we would a hotel with like hockey tape, and we like put it over the fire alarm thing that's on that. If there's an alarm clock in a room, put it face down. I would love to tell you all that my device is not plugged in near my head, but I would be lying to you. I have teenagers that are 16 and almost 19 who come in after I've gone to bed. And my connection with my kids when they're not home is for them to be able to call me or send me a message. And so probably half of the week when my son's at a hockey arena till 11, my daughter's out until whatever time, my phone is not, my Wi-Fi is not turned off. It is near my head because I'm their mom and I want them to be able to connect with me. And is that the best thing for my sleep? Absolutely not. Really crappy sleep hygiene, but I'm a mother and my kids need to be able to get in touch with me. When the kids are both at home under the roof, they know like that Wi-Fi is off, the timer is on, and that's great. So those are some things to think about as well. But then there's the hormones. And so here's the thing. When you are going into menopause and your progesterone is going to be the thing that drops out first, progesterone helps you sleep. And when you're not ovulating anymore and you are no longer naturally producing, like, in order to produce the highest abundance of progesterone, the follicles on the ovaries have to mature, have to release an egg, because the egg is the raw material for progesterone. So the body takes the egg and utilizes the theca cells, the corpus luteum, all of that to literally break down and manufacture progesterone in your body. When we are in perimenopause, we start to have what's known as more anovulatory cycles, meaning you can have a period every month, but it doesn't mean you ovulated. And if you didn't ovulate, your progesterone is going to be lower. So women will notice things like spotting, shorter cycle length, like maybe you used to get a period every 27, 29 days. Now it comes every 25. Solid indicator progesterone's getting lower. They notice their anxiety increases. They notice that their PMS, if they've had any, gets a little spicier. They notice that they want to hurt people who breathe near them and chew near them. And their sleep is much lighter. So talking to your practitioner and doing all of the things we've talked about nutritionally and lifestyle, but also using some progesterone, bioidentical progesterone, oral micronized progesterone, right? Or it could be cream-based. I find the oral micronized helps much better with sleep. And sometimes we also are like, at some point, women are going to have to also evaluate the use of estradiol, of estrogen. And for some women, it's like, this is where working with a very dialed in, open-minded practitioner, I think, is critical, because you're going to get a different perspective if you go to your GP or to your OBGYN versus a functional medicine practitioner or a naturopathic physician who has done the additional training. Is to understand that for some women, the progesterone might be enough to help them stay asleep. But if the problem is they can't fall asleep or stay asleep, they're waking repeatedly, they have hot flashes, they probably also need the combination of estrogen. And then it's working with somebody to help you understand, are you going to do physiologic dosing? Are you going to cycle this the way that the body would have naturally cycled the hormones? So, ladies listening, you start with your relationship with light, you get your blood sugar in check, you support your minerals and the nutrients that are needed, you consider bringing in some herbs, you do these things for a period of time to actually let your body learn a new rhythm. you manage your stress, you decrease or cut out the alcohol, and you have a conversation about what hormone therapy is going to look like for you moving forward. That's really that is the path.
I love that. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, you're welcome.
And on that note, too, I wanted to ask you, I mean, you have 25 plus years of experience in this field.
Mm-hmm.
And in, reflecting on all these things that we've touched on today, are there any particular trends that you could say that you have seen from the beginning in the 90s when you and I were teenagers? The good old 90s, I miss them.
I know. We just finished watching the 4-part documentary on the Tragically Hip, and I was like taken back to, those
Yeah,
years of our lives. And I was like, oh, I miss that.
totally, totally connect on that. But yeah, so the world has changed incredibly in
Mm-hmm.
that time from the
Yeah.
90s. But if you could maybe provide your insights, reflections on two phases in particular from the 90s up to 2019, and then from 2020 and onward, when we were hit with the chaos of the pandemic as well,
Mm-hmm.
that
Mm-hmm.
any trends in women's health, women's hormonal health, that you noticed and that you were dealing with a lot more or less with your clients?
The irony of that is that, from the 1990s into 2019 feels like it was about the same toll on our body as 2020 to now. It's been like the most intense 4 years slash what feels like 20 years that our bodies have gone through. I would say in the early years, everything was about weight loss and being little. Everything was about how small can you get. And in the early years, there was a lot of push to be vegetarian. If you're a woman, to be vegan, I was for a period of time and it felt good until it didn't. And so I would say that back in my early days, everything was rooted in finding the perfect meal plan, the perfect recipes, and the perfect like one way. Like I am defined by this. So I am a vegetarian. I am an omnivore. I am, if you were following blood typing diet back then, like everything was very much like, here's a system and you just need to plug yourself into the system. And for women, it was always about weight loss. So, back in those days and working in gyms, there was a women's section of the gym and there was a men's section of the gym. And there was, and the women's section was like pink and purple, and it was really light weights. And it was like circuit machines because we're
Yeah.
delicate. And then the
Right.
men's side is where you go find like the leg press and the squat cage and like everything you actually needed to build the muscle. And the language was different. We didn't build muscle as women, we toned. We toned and defined. And
Right.
as men, we built muscle and we got brawny and strong. So I would say the biggest shift of that is like we are embracing strong over skinny for women now. Thank goodness. And I think that we've still over the years moved through these trends of like, we went from years of Atkins, Pritikin, the zone diet, macrobiotic, vegetarian veganism, to then looking at things like paleo, the Whole30, to then ketogenic diets, carnivore, and like everything in between. And I've always sat back and I've never adopted those as being what I had to move my business into. I've never in 28 years of practice run a weight loss program. I knew very innately that the pathway to helping anybody to lose excess weight, to get strong, to feel vital, and to feel vibrant were the boring basics. And nobody wants to do the boring basics. They want the sexy stuff. They want the biohacking tools. They want all the gadgets and the gizmos. And it's like, okay. And listen, I own red light. I love my red light. I love my red light. I have an infrared sauna. I have those kind of things in that, but not for one hot second do I believe that my health is coming purely from result of that. My health comes from being boring. My health comes from drinking filtered water and getting enough of it in, getting in minerals, eating real food that has fallen off a tree or grown from the ground, ran across the land, or swam in the ocean. My lifestyle comes from going to bed. Like there's nothing I do where people are like, ooh, that sounds cool. People hear it and they're like, anything else? So do you got anything else? And so I would say that we are in this time now where I feel that people are really connecting to needing the foundations. Like we have lost our way. We have lost our way. And since 2020, I mean, it's been very interesting working in the women's health space, because in that period of time when everyone was going through, what we were told was a pandemic, and things were being shut down and we were being isolated, and, having to homeschool our kids, and just like women had a disproportionate level of responsibility and stress. And I have an incredible husband who is a super, hands-on dad, as he should be. But it was not the same. I was worrying about and thinking about things about our children and about the world and about our family as a whole that I innately as a woman was hardwired to. As where my husband's energy was just like protecting the family, not in the same way. For me, it was, I got to protect, I got to nurture, I have to be 12 steps ahead of the game. And working in the industry, I was exposed to a lot of other information that was happening when the pandemic was going on, where I was like, not for 1 second am I living my life according to what these mandates are telling me to do. Like, not even for one hot second. And so it also depended on what side of the spectrum you were on at that time. You were either grateful that there was rules because it made you feel safer, or you were living elbows out and like, absolutely not. And I was living elbows out. So when we think about the toll of this on our nervous system, your nervous system, those precious, beautiful adrenals that all of us as humans and animals have, we were tapped in a way where our resources were depleted faster than probably they ever have been for our generation. It was the first period of time that we were living for years on end in a heightened state of fear, panic, anticipation, and awareness. Then having media just constantly bring it in front of us. So in the last few years, what I saw was, in the beginning, when people are at home, everyone wanted to get fit. Everyone wanted to get healthy. They were like, this is the time freedom I have been looking for. And there was actually a lot of beauty in the chaos, because people now had the autonomy of choosing their time. And so it was great. And then we saw people really be like, wow, this has been a long 2 weeks. This has been going on for a long time. And you started to see that initial like joy out of it, kind of, in some ways, just move to exhaustion. And like, I'm like, how do I keep going in this way? And then you saw the other side of it, where in our practice, we saw the use of alcohol go up tremendously as a coping mechanism and as managing. And then we saw everyone get back to work. And now all this time people had, they didn't have anymore. And so it was like back to that sacrifice of, I'm going to have to sacrifice my own workouts, my own nutrition, all that, because I got to get back to the hustle and the bustle. And we have a lot more arguing online about what is and isn't good for our health now. So the way that information in healthcare is being delivered is very, you got to pick a side. And it's very like all or nothing is a lot of the energy that's out there. And I have felt like recently it's been very much around, you have to follow these 10 steps and do it perfectly or else. And I sit on this other side where, my company is called Simplicity very intentionally, because I have seen time and time again that if we apply the boring foundational practices and we create more simplicity and ease in all that we do, the body will follow. And if you can remove interference, you can work with functional practitioners. And so many women reach out and they're like, I'm so frustrated because my doctor said this, or my OBG or my endocrinologist. And I'm like, what you have to understand is you're going to the wrong office. Like, if you get into a massive accident or something serious happens, and like, you're not coming to someone like me, you're going to the hospital, you're going to those doctors, you're going to seek out that. But if your goal is you want to sleep better, you need more energy, you're healing an autoimmune condition, you've got major gut and skin issues going on, you want to work with somebody functionally integrative, so that not only is the education you're being provided, where you're being taught, not told. There's a huge difference. Like, we need to be teaching people. Stop telling people what to do and fucking teach them what to do. Like, educate people. We are so smart and our bodies are so brilliant. And so we don't need to be told what to do. When we're overwhelmed, we want to be told what to do because we're like, you do it for me. You just tell me and I'll do it. Guess what? It doesn't work that way. You have to understand why you need to be doing this, or why you should be doing this. So you have to, you have to invest the buy-in energy, which isn't about buying more stuff and things. It's like, you got to buy into your own health. You have to participate. This is no one else's responsibility. So I don't care if we're talking about what your doctor's providing you or your naturopath or your homeopath or whoever else, not their responsibility. They're a conduit. They are part of your health journey, but they do not live with you. They cannot move in with you no matter how much you offer to pay them, and they can't feed you. Like, you have to be willing to do this. And that for me is, if I look over the last 28 years from 17 to 45 at all the different stages of life and everything, that has stayed my MO. This is my body. This is my responsibility. This is my privilege to learn about my body and take care of my body. This is not being selfish. This is not being, self-centered. This is the gift that I've been given to take care of. And I've just taught women it in this capacity, because there is a different energy when you know that you actually do have a say in how you feel. You're not just handed shitty genes and handed, you don't have to inherit what someone else's past or history was. And you don't have to, go through your mother's menopause. You don't have to feel what everybody else is feeling. So, yeah.
Oh.
I love that.
I just say I love that. It's a privilege. It is
It
a
is.
privilege,
It is.
it's and it's a journey, right? It's not a destination, that, like that cliche saying, but
Mm-hmm.
it's our time, it's your time, and you need to respect yourself, and then other people will respect your opinion. But it
Mm-hmm.
all starts with you, really. And
Yeah.
yeah, I love that message. And that's what we teach other people too, right? We teach them and hope they do it, right?
Yeah.
Well, and
Yeah.
it's like, I realized a very long time ago, and I think working with athletes helped me understand this, because the lifespan of an athlete, for that being their career, is actually quite short. Meaning, like, most professional athletes, their career, like my husband played football in the States, the average NFL athlete's lifespan, like not when they're going to die, but their career span rather, is like 2 to 5 years. That's the average. Okay. And then hockey, you can get a little bit. I was like, we have to think about things in terms of the long game. Like, I show up in my body every day for the long game. I show up thinking about the body I want to feel and have and function with me for the next 30 plus years, not how I want to look in 30 days. And this is the mindset shift, because it's challenging. We're recording this January 20th. At this point now, most people who set a goal for their health for the new year, they've already told themselves, I couldn't do it, and they've already stopped. And it's like, oh my God, we have like 350 days to go still. And don't let, the new year, a new week, a new month be the thing that either motivates you or holds you back. Like, let your everyday be that for you.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And that's it. Believing that, you once said, when people ask you, how long is this going to take? And I think your answer was, well, how long do you want to live? Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I love that. That just sat with me. I'm like, you're right. It's not just a day, a week, a month of doing this. It's making that conscious choice to make those changes, believing in this amazing body that we've been given. In my view, on this health journey, learning from what I've learned from you is that it's always communicating with us. We just need to
Mhm.
remember to listen to it, and that it
Mhm.
was built exactly how it should. And it knows how to deal with things, but we interfere with all other kinds of things that stop that process from happening. So going back to that ancestral wisdom and that divine femininity that we all have, and gives that intuition to us of knowing what to do and sticking with it. It's just so important. and
Yeah.
and
Mm.
we've so, especially these last 4 years, many people gave away that power uh, over their health, over their body. And it's sad that we've become so disconnected. But again, there's always
Yeah.
today to start, right?
It is. And, I think it's like, trust me, I went through the ocean of emotions in the last 4 years. And what I've come to on this side now, because I've had a lot of really deep conversations with people on all different sides of the topic and the conversation and decisions made and all of that, is that, at the end of the day, everyone is actually doing the best they can with the information they have. And we don't always know why someone is making a decision in that moment that they believe to be the best one for them. And it is like, all we can do is just like meet people and love them where they're at and understand that on some level, like this had to happen. This had to happen. I know a lot of people who made decisions in the last few years that now are like never again. And they needed this moment in order to help them understand, like, hold up. I just outsourced massive decisions to a government or to a body that lives outside of the one that I live in every day. And they needed to have that moment of recognition or those months of recognition to be like, I will not do that again. I will not give up my personal power. I will not allow my own sovereignty to be decided by somebody else. And so I always try to step back and look at it through that lens of, you know, I do believe that most things happen for a reason. And what was the reason that we all chose to be here in this time and the sacred contracts we have in our life? To go through that, and what is our lesson from that? What can we take out of those experiences and now learn moving forward? And I really do believe that if something like that were to happen again, we would we would still see lots of people who would just be like, I will follow whatever I'm told to do. And again, that's their journey. But I do believe we would see so many more people who would say no, and who would pause, and who would ask for more information, and who would make different decisions.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think we're going to wrap up soon, but just before we do, we to kind of bring everything together, if we may. Before we got on the call, one of the things we touched on was how overwhelm and these last 4 years really contributed to that in many, many ways, as we've
Mhm.
touched on. But overwhelm seems to be at the top of everybody's vocab in terms of those who are aware and awake and want to do something, and but then freeze because
Mhm.
there's so many challenges in the world to deal with, and then, like you mentioned as well, so much information coming at us from so many different aspects. And so if you could share with us your approach, because with that banner of simplicity, um, some advice to our listeners on how they can move forward in optimizing their health and making those best decisions for themselves and their families.
Yeah, I mean, it'll be a little bit different for everyone. One thing that I often will say to people is, what is the one habit you keep hearing about that every time you hear it, it like wakes something up in you and you're thinking to yourself, like, I really need to start to do that. So I'm sure we talked about a lot of things today that could have woken that up. It can be something as simple as having a cup of water when you wake in the morning before you go and have the cup of coffee. Like, that sounds so trivial, but it will shift your palate. It already starts to cleanse the system. It'll change your relationship to why you need that coffee, like simple thing. It can be, getting outside for a 10-minute walk after you eat. It could be, actually taking the magnesium that's in your house, right? Instead of just being like, I own that. Could we solve it? Could we actually take it instead of just owning it? And so I always start with people where, if I look back in the earlier parts of my career, I'm probably even like 15 years ago, I used to give people like, if I look at it now, I'm like, whew, I gave them like a second job of all the things that I thought they should be doing for their health. And, and they were all good suggestions, but they weren't manageable for people to start with right away. And so now I just say to people, if there was one or two things that you could shift right now, what would they be? And if we could get them to a point where this is now your behavior, it's like brushing your teeth. Like, you're going to brush your teeth each morning and go to bed each night. And you probably wouldn't get very far into the next day without being like, oh my gosh, I have to go brush my teeth. Like, it just would feel really, really off and really gross to you. You start to know that you've developed your own behaviors and personal habits when those things are natural, where, you're not going to get an hour into the day without being like, I haven't had any water yet. Or the idea of not going for a walk or moving your body at some point in the day, you're like, oh, I feel like I've got like cobwebs on me. I got to go like break out of these. So it's starting to develop the 1-2. So what I say to my clients, what's the 1-2? What are the 1-2 things that we can start to do until you're like, this is now natural and part of who I am. I'm ready for the next. And so that, like, just chip away at it. This is the birthplace of simplicity. The harder we make it, the harder it's going to be. And we were saying, I believe before this, I was saying one of my favorite quotes ever is that it's the small hinges that swing the big doors. And we believe as humans that we have to lay the hammer. We have to change everything. The harder it is, the better the return, right? Or the bigger the return that we're going to receive. The opposite is true. Start it, like, no matter what it is you choose to do for your health, the most important practice is consistency. So pick one thing and be super consistent with it, and then it becomes part of who you are. Pick something else, become super consistent with it. And this is like, I always say to people, I'm on chapter 28 of my health journey. And every day, every month, every year, I'm writing a new sentence or a new page of this chapter of my health. There's lots of things that I can still do better for my health, and they'll happen or they won't, but they don't all have to happen today. Because again, I'm not focused on how I'm going to feel in 30 days. I'm thinking about the long game. So I give myself a lot of space and grace. And for all the listeners, like, just please start doing that for yourself. There's no one handing out stickers and medals at the end of this. Like, don't make it harder than it has to be. Adopt a few simple things, celebrate it, and let's go from there.
Love that.
Yeah.
That's great. Amen to that, Jenn. I know we have to go, but what you were talking about is just one follow-up question to this from the perspective as a mother who, as traditionally women being the healers in the family, the nurturers, those teachers, and the guardians of the well-being of the next generation.
Yeah.
What message could you bestow on our mothers who are listening, our grandmothers too, who are also struggling with today's influx of everything that their kids are dealing with, from the health perspective, and also how you mentioned, you have your relationship with your kids also on the technology side of things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, every day is a new lesson with it. It is what I have learned with our kids specifically is that arguing about it gets us nowhere. Talking about it gets us further. So our kids have grown up in a household where health has just been a part of their life. They have grown up knowing all about it. But again, like, I have teens. I was sharing this in stories yesterday. Around the age of 12, I lost all control over what they were eating. They started to make their own decisions. They got jobs. They have their own money. They're out with friends. They're eating things where I am like, oh my God. And, to them, they're like, you've made us eat vegetables our whole life. Like, we're fine. And I'm just like, you do have to let them explore that, and not, what I've learned is, like, you cannot penalize your kids for some of the decisions that they're making. Again, educate them, teach them the why behind the what, and, little things like buying them blue blockers that they have and they wear them sometimes and they don't. Well, you know what? I'm just grateful for the sometimes, and that they, are doing that in the first place. And so it's also like, my husband and I just have good talks with our kids where we're like, this is our home, and these are things we're going to do in our home. And so these are the roots that you come back to. When you're out, you have to make your own decisions. So we just, we move back and forth with that. I would say as a mother, or, the matriarch of the family that's trying to hold that energy, is understand that the more you can become connected to your own health and the wisdom of your body as a woman, you will naturally and innately start to move that energy throughout the household. And the more connected you become with your body, I believe as women, we hold superpowers literally in our cycles, but that we just have this the intuitive wisdom in our bodies that was designed very specially for us. And, men have this in a different way, but for us as women, we are the natural connectors, and we are the medicine women, and we are the healers, and we are the nurturers. And you have to start to believe that your role in this is actually to do this for yourself first, and then the others. And as women, and our mothers and grandmothers did this, they did it the other way. They healed the others first. And then if they could, bring it back to self. And so this generation of women, because we are so overwhelmed and overstimulated, and, I always say we have two limbs, but we move through life, or two arms rather, but we move through life like we're an octopus with eight, just trying to juggle a million things. Like, bring it back home, take the time to take care of yourself. And I can remember one of my mentors, like I was probably 21, 22 when she said this to me. She was like, you're actually going to have to learn how to be okay disappointing people in order to be able to take care of yourself the way you need to. Because at that young age, I was already, and this was my lesson. I've burned out a couple of times because I just want to help every woman I meet. And in doing that, I kept giving parts of myself away. Like, what do you need? What do you need? You need more of me? I'll give you more of me. And I've always come back to that, where it's like, when you start to say no to your children, to your family, to your neighbors, to your family, like your mother, your father, whoever, your coworkers, you're going to disappoint some people. And that's actually a really beautiful lesson in life. It's a lesson for you and it's a lesson for them. You teach people what to expect of you. So if you want to have more for you and you want to feel more fulfilled for your own life, you have to teach people by showing them that you matter.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you
thank
so
you.
much.
Thank you. I really enjoyed our chat today.
Oh, so did we. And thank you for going a little extra overtime with us. We really appreciate it. Appreciate your wisdom, your presence, everything.
Thank you.
Yeah, and thank you, Jenn. Maybe tell listeners where they can find you and anything you're working on right now. Yep, please go ahead.
Yeah. The best place, I'm only hanging out on Instagram, which is Jenn with two N's. So it's Jenn Pike. And then my website, jennpike.com. I've got my podcast, The Simplicity Sessions, and I'm over on YouTube. Pretty much if you just type in Jenn Pike, you'll land somewhere. And in terms of things I'm working on now, I don't know when exactly this will be airing, but we're getting ready to onboard into the next round of the perimenopause project. So we take 40 women each round into this. We are actually, I'm so excited. We are going to be part of one of the first studies done on women's health gut microbiomes in perimenopause using our methodology with a really incredible functional lab that is created by one of the PhDs out of the University of Toronto. And it is a functional stool test. And so all the women coming into this next round that starts February 12th, they're all getting to test. And it's a very exciting time for me as a practitioner, because the more we learn and the more that we can educate women, not only are we going to be changing the lives of women in their 40s plus, but the more they learn, they take this back to the community. They take this back to their children. And so it's like I said at the very beginning, when we help one woman, we help the whole house. And so that's what we have starting on February the 12th. And then we have our online synced community, which is our movement studio, a studio that women can join at any time. Yeah.
And ladies, anyone who's listening, do check out Jenn's work, get involved. And the men in your lives, this would be amazing to present this, to your partners, wives, sisters, mothers. I mean, Jenn is such, has so much abundance in knowledge and as you know, experience in this area. It'd make a great birthday gift, Christmas, everything. Just connect with Jenn. I can't say it more.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for listening. And remember,
you are more powerful than you know.